I am Mackenzie, 28 years old. My debit card was declined. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Account closed. You don't have money anymore. That was the text from my father. No greeting, no explanation, just a blunt clinical message that read more like a bank notification than something your own flesh and blood would send. I stared at it, half awake, brain lagging behind what my eyes were seeing. My phone buzzed again, a second message lighting up the screen. Don't try to undo it. The money's gone. Move on. I sat bolt upright in bed, adrenaline slamming through my chest. That account wasn't just a checking account. It was my everything. It held the savings I'd built for over a decade. Every freelance check, every emergency fund deposit, every dollar I'd scraped together while building my startup from the ground up. The account I'd opened at 17 with my dad as the co-signer, just in case. I'd always told myself I'd remove him when I had more time. That time never came. The banking app wouldn't even let me log in. It gave one message: account closed by primary account holder. My father. He was still listed as primary. I hadn't noticed. I hadn't cared. I was too busy building a future, one he apparently felt entitled to dismantle. Have you ever trusted the wrong person? Tell me in the comments. I called him immediately, straight to voicemail, called again and again, nothing. I texted my mother. Her reply came in minutes. I'm sure there's a mix-up. Maybe it's fraud. You know how your dad gets when he's stressed. Her tone was wrong, too casual, too light for the weight of what just happened. She knew, she had to, and she wasn't surprised. I drove to their house without thinking, a silent storm brewing in my chest. Everything looked upgraded. A new truck in the driveway, fresh paint on the shutters, a decorative wreath on the door. Little luxuries that didn't add up last time I visited, but I'd been too distracted to question them. I knocked. He answered. No shame, no guilt, just his usual expression, calm, smug, matter of fact. What did you expect? He said, as if I'd just dropped by to borrow sugar. You don't even live here anymore. That money's just been sitting. We needed it. His tone was flat, rehearsed. I asked if I heard him right, if he was seriously admitting to draining my account. He didn't flinch. We needed it, he repeated. And honestly, you owe us, after everything we did for you. You wouldn't even have that money if we hadn't helped you get started. A little gratitude wouldn't kill you. He looked me in the eyes like I was the one being unreasonable, and that's when it hit me. He didn't think this was theft. He didn't even think it was wrong. He believed it was his money, because I was his daughter, because in his mind, everything I had, I owed to him. My savings, my work, my success, all of it. If you've ever been financially controlled by someone who claimed they loved you, you know exactly how this feels. In that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't desperation. It was premeditated. It was deliberate. And it was personal. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And I was done being the obedient daughter. Everything was about to change. For years, I genuinely believed I was doing the right thing. Helping my parents had always felt like an unwritten clause in our relationship, something unspoken but expected. When I started earning real money, I didn't hesitate to share. It started small, paying off a few of their credit cards, covering a surprise vet bill for the family dog, sending money during a tight winter when the heating bill got too high. Each time, they thanked me with just enough enthusiasm to make it feel appreciated, but never so much that it didn't feel routine. My father called it pulling your weight. My mother said I was just doing what any good daughter would. Somewhere along the way, I started to believe them. The joint account wasn't even supposed to be joint anymore. When I opened it before college, I needed a co-signer because I was underage. It was just supposed to be temporary, but once I moved away, things were busy. Life took over. My dad still had access, but I kept an eye on it, or at least I thought I did. I'd become so focused on running my business, booking clients, and planning expansion, I stopped noticing the little withdrawals. $100 here, $300 there. A $900 utility payment I never investigated because I assumed it was an old balance or something I forgot to cancel. Looking back, I realized they were testing me, seeing how much they could take before I reacted. I didn't react because I trusted them. I believed their narrative, that family helps each other, that they were struggling, that they'd pay me back when things got better. But things never got better. They just got more comfortable with taking. There were signs, of course. Like when I bought myself a new laptop after 3 years of working on one with a cracked screen, and my mom texted, "Must be nice to waste money like that." Or the time my dad asked for help with one missed mortgage payment, and then posted a photo 2 days later of their brand new flat screen TV with the caption, "Treating ourselves, finally." I told myself it was just poor timing, that they deserved a little joy. Now I saw it clearly. I wasn't helping them. I was funding them. They weren't struggling. They were choosing to prioritize their own comfort at the expense of my future. Every time I sent them money, I was reinforcing the idea that I existed to clean up their messes, that I was their safety net, their backup plan, their personal ATM with a face and a birthday they forgot half the time. Sitting in my car after confronting my dad, I stared blankly at the dashboard. I didn't cry, not yet. I just felt hollow. Like all the years of quiet sacrifices, skipped vacations, and overdrawn kindness had finally emptied me out. Helping family wasn't the mistake. Trusting the wrong people with that help was. And now I was going to make sure they never had that access again. When I got home that night, I pulled out every piece of paperwork I could find related to the account. Old statements, bank emails, even the original documents I'd signed when I was 17. The truth stared back at me in black ink. My father was the primary account holder. I was listed as an authorized user, a technicality I'd overlooked for 15 years, and one that had just cost me nearly $70,000. That word, authorized, mocked me. I had assumed joint meant equal, mutual control, shared responsibility. But in reality, I had unknowingly handed him full ownership of everything I deposited. I could access the funds, yes, but legally, they were his. He had every right to close the account, withdraw the money, and disappear. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was structural. I opened my laptop and scoured my online banking history. Transactions I'd overlooked suddenly glared like neon signs, weekly withdrawals at gas stations nowhere near my home. Online purchases from luxury clothing sites with shipping addresses I didn't recognize. Even a $400 payment to a landscaping service. My parents' yard had been looking unusually manicured lately. This wasn't a one-time act of desperation. It was a slow bleed, one I hadn't felt until the artery was severed. I called the bank the next morning, half hoping there had been a mistake. The woman on the line was kind but firm. "Unfortunately, Ms. Elliott, since you're not the primary account holder, you don't have legal authority to reopen or recover the funds." "But I earned that money," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "It was all mine, every dollar." "I understand," she replied gently, "but unless fraud can be proven or both parties agree to release the funds back, we're limited in what we can do." Both parties. As if my father and I were equal participants in this theft. As if this were a dispute over lunch, not the hijacking of my financial life. After the call, I sat in silence for nearly an hour. I wasn't just broke, I'd been legally outmaneuvered, and by someone who was supposed to protect me, someone who used his role as a father to lull me into complacency, then used my trust as leverage. I'd always known my dad had control issues. He needed to be in charge, needed to be the one handling things. He once grounded me for paying a parking ticket on my own, told me I should have come to him first. Back then, I thought he was just overbearing. Now I realized it was something darker. Control was currency to him, and he'd been collecting it for years. I thought I'd outgrown needing his approval. I thought becoming financially independent had freed me, but he'd been holding the strings all along, quietly tightening the noose. And now I wasn't just cutting those strings, I was going to set fire to them. I had never felt so humiliated and exposed. It wasn't just the money. It was the realization that everything I'd built, saved, and worked toward had been sitting under someone else's thumb the entire time. My balance was zero, but the real damage was internal. My trust was bankrupt. I stared at my laptop screen for what felt like hours. The number mocking me at the top of the page, $0.00. Beneath it, a trail of withdrawals, each one like a needle jab. Grocery store in their neighborhood, payment to a roofing company I'd never hired, a $2,500 wire transfer to FELLIOT, my father's initials. Each charge felt like a gut punch, not just for the money, but for what it revealed. This was no impulse act. It was a calculated siphoning of funds from someone they assumed would never push back. I didn't plan on confronting him again, not so soon, but the rage didn't let me sleep. By 5 a.m., I was dressed and halfway to their house, the sun still trying to drag itself over the horizon. The numbness from the day before had given way to something hotter, sharper. This wasn't going to be a quiet conversation. I was done being calm. When I pulled into their driveway, I saw the new truck again, sleek, spotless, obnoxiously unnecessary. The sight of it made my fists clench. That truck was mine, in a way, bought with the savings I spent years earning while eating store-brand pasta and skipping nights out. I had sacrificed for that account. They had splurged. I didn't bother knocking. I rang the doorbell and pounded at the same time. The porch light flicked on. My father opened the door in his bathrobe, hair disheveled, face unreadable. "What the hell are you doing here this early?" he said, squinting into the light. "Where is my money?" The words came out low, steady, and cold. He smirked, and for the first time in my life, I hated the man in front of me. "Still obsessing over that? I told you. We needed it." "You stole it," I snapped. "And you didn't just empty the account, you closed it behind my back. Do you understand that I have bills to pay? That my life depends on that money?" "You're overreacting," he said, already turning away. "Come back when you've calmed down." I followed him inside without permission. We're doing this now." My mother appeared in the hallway, tying her robe. "Mackenzie, this is not the time." "Really?" I cut in. "Because yesterday apparently was the time to wipe out my account and ghost me like a scammer." My dad dropped into his recliner and picked up the remote like we were going to have this conversation over morning cartoons. "Watch your tone." "No," I said, stepping between him and the TV. "You don't get to sit there and act like this is normal. You stole from your daughter. Say it, out loud." He stared at me, expression tightening. "We took what was ours." "It wasn't yours." "You wouldn't have had any of it without us," he barked. "We raised you, fed you, paid for your damn braces. You think you got here on your own?" "I do," I said, voice shaking now. "I paid my way through school. I built my business from the ground up. You contributed nothing to that savings account, not 1 cent, and you still thought you had a right to take it." My mother folded her arms, her voice cold. "It's just money, Mackenzie. Maybe if you stopped acting like you're better than everyone." "I am better," I snapped. "Not because of money, because I don't steal from the people I claim to love." That landed. My father stood up slowly, eyes blazing. "You think you're going to make us the villains here?" I held his gaze. "You made yourselves the villains." And then I turned and walked out, letting the door slam behind me. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. After the confrontation, I expected at least a message, a half-hearted apology, maybe a gaslighting-laced explanation. But what I got was complete silence. No calls, no texts, no emails, nothing. It was almost laughable, how quickly they vanished after being forced to face what they'd done. One moment I was their daughter, the next I was a financial inconvenience with too many opinions. I spent that first day waiting, compulsively checking my phone as if their shame might eventually outweigh their pride. But the screen stayed dark. By day 3, I stopped hoping. Their silence wasn't hesitation. It was strategy. Avoidance was my father's preferred weapon. Growing up, if I ever confronted him about missing my recital, about yelling too loud, about borrowing money from my birthday card, he'd go quiet for days, punishing me with withdrawal until I apologized. It always worked. Back then, I'd beg for reconciliation just to make the tension stop. I'd cave. But I wasn't 13 anymore, and I was done chasing peace at the expense of my self-respect. So I pivoted. If they wanted to ghost me, I would give them something to be afraid of in the silence. I started documenting everything, every charge I hadn't made, every screen recording of their public Instagram posts. My dad showing off the truck, my mom posing in a new coat, captioned, "Deserved this." Every withdrawal I didn't authorize. I pulled up the transaction logs and cross-referenced dates, locations, and amounts. I built a timeline of financial theft so airtight it could suffocate a lie in seconds. Next, I called the bank again, this time not to beg for help, but to initiate a formal fraud claim. The representative sounded hesitant until I explained I had documented proof and that the account had been closed without my consent. "We've seen family financial abuse before," she said quietly, "but yours is extensive. We'll flag the account and escalate it to our legal team." The word abuse rattled in my chest. I hadn't said it out loud. I'd danced around it, called it betrayal, theft, entitlement. But the truth was uglier than that. It was abuse. The kind you can't see on skin, but feel in every bone. The kind wrapped in the phrase, "we're family," as if that ever justified exploitation. That night, I wrote them an email, not because I expected a response, but because I needed to say it for me. Subject: Final notice. You had a choice. You chose theft, lies, and silence. You are not entitled to my money, my forgiveness, or my presence. The bank is investigating. I've submitted all documentation. Do not contact me again unless it's through legal counsel. I hit send. Minutes later, the read receipt pinged. Seen, no reply, and just like that, I stopped waiting for their apology. I'd stopped being their silent supporter. Now I was their reckoning. I wasn't expecting the footage to shake me the way it did. After the fraud claim was escalated, the bank requested any supporting materials I could gather. That's when I remembered. 2 months earlier, I had signed up for purchase protection through my card issuer, something I barely glanced at the time. What I didn't realize was that it also included location-based monitoring and, in some cases, security camera access from participating retailers, so I requested the footage. Not because I needed more proof, they'd already buried themselves in digital receipts, but because some part of me wanted to see it. I wanted to confront the image I'd clung to for too long, the belief that deep down, my father wouldn't really do this to me. The first clip came from a high-end electronics store downtown, a grainy security cam angled slightly downward. There he was, my father, wearing a Red Sox cap, sunglasses, and a windbreaker. He wasn't sneaking. He wasn't even pretending to hide. He was laughing with the sales clerk as he handed over my credit card and signed the receipt like it was nothing, like it belonged to him. He patted the box, a new iMac, and gave a thumbs up to the employee before leaving with it tucked under one arm. I watched it 3 times, then I opened the next clip. This one was at a jewelry store. My mother, dressed in heels and that faux modesty church smile she always put on when she wanted something expensive for free. She leaned over the glass case, pointing at a silver necklace. The timestamp placed it just 3 days after she told me on the phone she couldn't afford to fix the leaking roof and would have to postpone the repairs again. There was no roof, just a necklace. In the final clip, I watched my father walk into the truck dealership. This was the one that broke me. He walked across the showroom floor with a confident swagger, slapped a manila envelope down on the desk, and within seconds, shook hands with the dealer. He even posed for a photo in front of the vehicle, grinning like a man who had won something. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been. This wasn't hot, fast-burning rage. It was something slower, heavier. Watching him grin in that video, I realized I hadn't just been robbed. I had been mocked. He had paraded around in the remains of my hard work like it was a costume he'd earned. He wasn't ashamed. He was proud. I submitted the footage to the bank and then to my attorney. I didn't even need to narrate it. The videos spoke volumes. That night, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by bank statements and court forms, one truth settled like concrete in my chest. They never thought I'd fight back. They saw my silence as submission. And now, they were about to learn the cost of underestimating me. By the time I sat down in Linda Farrow's office, I had replayed every betrayal so many times. The memories felt smooth at the edges, like stones I'd turned over in my palm for too long. But she was different. She didn't gasp when I explained how my father had cleaned out the account. She didn't blink when I showed her the videos. She just nodded and started making notes. "Family financial abuse," she said, almost like a diagnosis. "It's more common than people think, and rarely reported until it's too late. But you caught it in time. That's going to matter." Her voice was calm, clipped, the kind of steady that made you feel like you weren't crazy for calling theft what it was, even when the thieves were the people who gave you life. She'd been recommended by a client of mine, someone who'd gone through something similar with a sibling. The moment Linda answered my call, I knew I was in the right place. "We need to approach this from two angles," she said, pulling up a legal pad. "Civil restitution and potential criminal liability. First, we file a civil claim to recover what was taken. Second, we initiate a formal fraud report with the local district attorney. Given the evidence you've provided, bank records, footage, the abrupt account closure, we have a very strong case." I hesitated. "So, this could actually go to court?" She nodded. "It could, and it should. Because this wasn't just a misunderstanding, Mackenzie. This was calculated. They closed the account, used your credit line, and left a digital footprint a mile wide. That's not bad judgment. That's fraud." The word still stung. Fraud. It made it real, made it legal, made it permanent. Linda leaned forward, softening. "I know this is painful, but if you don't hold them accountable, they'll keep doing this. Maybe not to you, if you cut them off, but to someone else, a cousin, a neighbor. Each time they succeed, they rewrite the story. We didn't do anything wrong. They were just being dramatic. You need to stop that story in its tracks." I nodded slowly. She was right. My parents had never truly faced consequences, not for the emotional manipulation, the constant boundary violations, or now this. They always managed to spin it, to make themselves the victims. But not this time. Linda slid a packet of documents across the table. "This is the initial complaint. I'll file it with the civil court tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm drafting a demand letter. It will give them a chance to settle before we escalate. Though, given what you've told me, I wouldn't hold your breath." "I'm not," I said quietly. "I'm done waiting on them." She looked at me, assessing. "Good. Then let's take back what's yours." Walking out of that office, I didn't feel vindicated yet, but I felt something better, prepared, and for the first time since that message, "You don't have money anymore," I believed I was going to get more than just my money back. I was going to get my power back. The funny thing about abuse that hides behind family dynamics is that it teaches you not to call it abuse. It teaches you to explain it away, to soften the words, to hold your breath and say, "They're doing their best," even as they dig deeper into you. Growing up, I learned quickly that speaking up meant backlash. My father didn't yell much. He didn't need to. His disappointment was sharper than any raised voice. If I questioned him, I was being ungrateful. If I pushed back, I was starting drama. If I cried, I was too sensitive. My mother called it just the way he is. I called it normal, so I learned to shrink. I apologized for things I didn't do. I cleaned up messes I didn't make. I laughed off the small betrayals, the money that went missing from my birthday cards, the sudden emergencies that always came right after I got paid, the silent treatment that would stretch for days if I dared to say no. My job in their eyes was to be good, quiet, supportive, but silence has a cost. Every time I bit my tongue to keep the peace, it chipped away at my own sense of justice. Every time I said, "It's okay, I understand," I gave them more room to cross the line, until one day, there was no line left. That conditioning stayed with me well into adulthood, even as I became successful, even as I paid my own rent, built my own business, managed my own life. I still flinched at the thought of upsetting them. I still second-guessed every boundary I tried to set. When I lent them money, I told myself it was just what family did. When they forgot my birthday but remembered to ask for my Venmo password, I convinced myself I was being petty to care. I wasn't petty. I was being played. It wasn't until I started therapy last year, long before the theft, that I realized the quiet I'd been raised in wasn't peace. It was suppression. My therapist, Dr. Mendez, had said something in one of our earliest sessions that stuck with me. Abusers don't need to raise their voices when they've already trained you to whisper. Now, sitting in my apartment surrounded by legal documents and timelines of betrayal, I heard those words louder than ever. I had been whispering my whole life. But the day my father closed that account without warning, he didn't just steal my money. He gave me permission, unintentionally and far too late, to finally raise my voice. No more shrinking, no more excusing, no more translating manipulation into love. I wasn't quiet anymore. I was going to be loud, legal, and impossible to ignore. And for the first time, I didn't feel scared to speak. I felt powerful. I thought the damage was contained to that one account. I was wrong. After my initial meeting with Linda, I started combing through everything with a new lens. emails, linked apps, old paper files I'd shoved in drawers years ago. What began as a cleanup effort quickly turned into a full-blown forensic audit of my own financial life, and what I found made the account theft look like the tip of an iceberg I'd been standing on for years. It started with a notification from an auto loan provider I didn't recognize. Reminder, your monthly payment is due in 5 days. I hadn't financed a car in years. I'd paid mine off in full 2 summers ago. Confused, I logged in using the account number from the email and reset the password using my old high school security answers I knew my father also had. And there it was, a truck loan in my name. Not my truck, obviously, the one sitting in their driveway. $46,000 financed under my social security number. I felt sick. My name, my credit, my liability. He hadn't just drained the joint account. He'd forged my identity to get the loan approved. Worse, I realized, he probably used my excellent credit score as the main leverage. While I had been building my financial future, he'd been hijacking it. Panicked, I pulled my credit report. I hadn't checked it in over 6 months. No need, I'd thought, with everything on autopilot. But the damage was there in glaring detail. A missed payment on the truck loan, 2 credit inquiries from appliance stores I'd never been to, and a store card opened at a local home improvement chain, all of them tied to my name, all of them unpaid. I sat at my kitchen table, jaw clenched, heart hammering. Each new detail cut deeper than the last. These weren't just mistakes. This was systematic. It wasn't just about stealing from me. It was about erasing the life I'd worked to build and replacing it with debts I didn't owe, obligations I never agreed to, and damage I never authorized. By noon, I was back in Linda's office, credit reports and loan documents spread out in front of us like evidence in a criminal trial. This, she said, flipping through the stack, is identity theft. And now we're not just talking about civil restitution, we're talking felony-level fraud. It was hard to breathe, not from fear, but from the weight of clarity. They hadn't just taken what I had. They were banking on my silence to build their lives on my name. They counted on you never checking, Linda said. Never digging, never fighting back. I nodded, finally understanding the depth of it all. The account theft wasn't the end. It was the warning shot. And now I was fully awake. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was about to dismantle every single lie they'd constructed on top of me, line by line, debt by debt, lie by lie. The more I looked, the more they'd left behind. I used to think my parents were sloppy with money. Turns out they were just sloppy, period. For people who went to such lengths to hide what they were doing, they hadn't covered their tracks nearly as well as they thought. They'd underestimated me, again, just like they always had. The key mistake? They assumed I'd never look past what was taken. They didn't anticipate I'd go searching for how it was taken. I started with the dealership, the one where my father bought the truck in my name. A call to the finance department, posing as Melissa Elliott, yielded more than I expected. The loan application had been submitted online and then signed in person. I asked for a copy, which they hesitated to send until I mentioned the police report. Suddenly, they were cooperative. When the scanned application arrived in my inbox, I stopped breathing. The signature line was filled with my name in handwriting that didn't even attempt to match mine. It looked like a high school forgery. Below it, a copy of a driver's license, my license, but photoshopped, poorly. The lighting was off, the edges pixelated. He'd taken a scan of my ID from an old tax file I'd saved on our shared Google Drive and edited the date to make it appear recently issued. The dealership had accepted it without question. I forwarded the file to Linda immediately. Her reply was blunt and satisfying. This just made prosecution significantly easier. This is clear-cut forgery and wire fraud, she said. The next breadcrumb came from my iCloud account. I remembered that 2 years ago, when my mom accidentally locked herself out of her phone, I'd temporarily added her to my Apple family sharing plan to help her re-download apps. I never removed her. That meant she'd had access not just to my shared purchases, but to stored passwords I'd forgotten were syncing across devices. That included my Amazon account, Uber, and even a second savings account I rarely touched, until I logged in and saw 2 transfers, both under $500 made last winter to cover holiday expenses. I'd missed them because they were under the fraud alert threshold. They hadn't taken everything at once. They'd tested the waters, bit by bit. 100 here, 1,000 there, seeing how much they could get away with before I noticed. And I didn't notice, because they were my parents, because I had spent my entire life believing they wouldn't do something like this. Now, the evidence was stacking. Emails, bank transfers, fake signatures, blurred receipts, and doctored documents. I labeled each one in a shared folder for Linda titled Exhibit A to Z. They had left behind more than a digital trail. They'd left behind a pattern, a history of behavior they'd repeated for years under the guise of family trust. And they forgot one crucial thing: paper doesn't lie. And I was done lying for them. I knew exactly how to bait them. Kindness, not real kindness, of course. The kind they liked best. Performative, convenient, easily misunderstood as surrender. It was the language they spoke fluently, the one I'd been forced to master growing up. Say what they wanted to hear, stroke their ego just enough, and they'd come crawling out of the shadows with their guards down. I was going to use that against them. The letter wasn't a spontaneous gesture. It was a calculated trap. My lawyer didn't love the idea at first. If you send anything, it should go through me, Linda warned. You've already filed a fraud report. Anything you write could complicate that. I won't promise anything, I told her. I won't say I forgive them. I'll just crack the door open, let them walk right into it. It was handwritten, soft in tone, vague in meaning, exactly the kind of message that would make my parents believe they'd won. I folded the paper neatly and mailed it with no return address. Inside, it read, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we all made mistakes. I never wanted things to get so far. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm open to hearing your side. Maybe we can fix this quietly, without dragging the whole family into it. Mac. It was the perfect combination of conciliatory and vague, just enough doubt to make them second-guess the investigation, just enough warmth to make them think I was slipping back into my old role, the peacemaker, the one who always forgave first. I sent it on a Friday. By Sunday, the texts started rolling in. First from my mother. We got your note. We're so relieved you're coming to your senses. Then my father. Glad to hear you don't want to blow this out of proportion. Let's just clean this up. Clean this up. As if what they did was a spilled drink. Not fraud, not theft. Just a little mess they expected me to mop up quietly like always. But they didn't know I was already recording everything. Every text, every voicemail, every implication that they knew what they'd done, but thought I was weak enough to let it go. I even coaxed my dad into confirming he had accessed the truck financing to get us over a rough patch, in writing. Linda nearly choked on her coffee when she read the messages. You realize you just got them to admit to fraud, voluntarily. I know, I said, they're predictable. They weren't sorry. They weren't confused. They thought they'd won. That one folded piece of paper had been all it took to bring their arrogance to the surface again. But this time, I wasn't here to forgive. I was here to build my case, word by word, text by text, and they had just handed me the smoking gun. 3 days after they responded to my forgiveness letter, my mother posted a photo on Facebook. She was standing on a balcony overlooking turquoise waves, cocktail in hand, sun hat tilted just so. The caption read, "Sometimes you just have to treat yourself." Deserved non-healing time. I stared at the screen in disbelief, the anger that had begun to cool immediately igniting again. They were in Cancun. I scrolled through her profile, heart pounding. More posts. My dad posing in front of a luxury pool cabana with a cigar between his fingers. A video of them dancing at a beachfront restaurant, laughing like two teenagers on a second honeymoon. Comments flooded in from their friends and church acquaintances. You two look amazing. Well-deserved getaway. Living your best life. They were, on my dime. The most infuriating part wasn't just the trip. It was the timing. They'd received the fraud notice from the bank 5 days earlier. They'd read my cease and desist letter. They'd responded to my fake olive branch as if I was the one who needed to make amends. And then, with full knowledge that I was preparing legal action, they took a luxury vacation. I wasn't just some overreacting daughter anymore. I was a bank account they'd decided was closed in more ways than one. They had used me, used my name, used my trust. And now they were posting about their healing? Number? Not this time. I screenshotted everything: the photos, the captions, the timestamps. I sent them to Linda that night with one line: "Add this to the file." Her response came minutes later. "This is gold. Timeline inconsistency, evidence of misuse of funds during an active fraud claim, and proof of intent to deceive. It strengthens the criminal side of our case." But legal firepower aside, something shifted in me emotionally that night. Until then, a tiny, shameful part of me still wanted to believe there was room for redemption, that maybe my parents had acted out of fear or panic or some twisted desperation they couldn't control. The vacation erased that illusion. This wasn't fear. This was entitlement in its most grotesque form, masked as leisure, packaged as self-care, and posted with hashtags. They didn't just take my money. They took what that money represented: security, stability, peace of mind. And now they were sipping cocktails under a sunset while I paid legal bills to repair the crater they left behind. I closed my laptop and stared at the dark window, my reflection barely visible in the glass. They thought they were celebrating freedom, but what they didn't know, what they never seemed to understand, was that they had just buried the last thread of hope I had left for reconciliation. There would be no second letter, no final warning. The gloves were off, and the next time we met, it wouldn't be over brunch or family therapy. It would be across from each other in court. Filing the civil suit felt like crossing a line I was never supposed to touch. Somewhere deep in the marrow of me, that old voice, my mother's voice, still whispered, "Family doesn't take family to court." But family also doesn't forge your name, ruin your credit, or blow your savings on beachside cocktails. That voice had kept me loyal to people who treated me like a wallet with emotions. I wasn't listening anymore. Linda moved fast. With the evidence we had, transaction logs, forged documents, text message admissions, and yes, the vacation photos, we filed suit in county civil court for restitution and damages totaling just over $93,000. That included the stolen funds, identity fraud, credit repair costs, and the emotional and financial toll of trying to untangle it all while still running my business. "They'll receive the summons within 48 hours, Linda said as she handed me the final papers to sign. "Once it's delivered, it becomes real. Just be prepared. They won't go quietly." They didn't. Less than a day after the process server delivered the documents, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. My dad's voice spilled out of the speaker like poison. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You're not going to win, and you've made your mother cry. Congratulations." There it was. The script: guilt, gaslight, threaten, minimize. I didn't respond. An hour later, an email popped up, from my mother this time. No subject line, just a long paragraph about how I was tearing the family apart, how my grandmother would be disappointed in me, and how she and my father were now emotionally and spiritually bankrupt thanks to my crusade. I forwarded the email to Linda without reading past the first sentence. She replied, "Perfect. Shows pressure tactics and emotional manipulation. Exactly what we want the judge to see." The court date came faster than expected. My parents requested a delay, claimed health issues, then a scheduling conflict. The judge denied both. We showed up. So did they. Walking into that courtroom, I felt like a stranger to myself. My hands were steady. My voice didn't shake. I sat across from the people who raised me, dressed in their Sunday best, trying to look like victims. But they couldn't fake remorse, not convincingly, not anymore. When Linda presented the evidence, it was surgical. Each exhibit placed on the screen, every transaction traced. She read the text where my father admitted to accessing my truck loan. She displayed the forged signature on the dealership documents. She showed the Cancun photos, captioned, dated, damning. My parents avoided eye contact. My mother dabbed at non-existent tears with a tissue. My father tapped his foot so hard it echoed through the floor. We rested our case, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, I felt something like peace. Not justice, not yet, but clarity. A quiet, powerful certainty. They weren't going to talk their way out of this. And I wasn't afraid of them anymore. They didn't even last 10 minutes under pressure. The courtroom was still quiet from our side's closing statements when my father leaned toward his attorney, whispering furiously. Moments later, the defense requested a recess. Linda smirked. "Here it comes," she whispered to me. "They're cracking." And they did, spectacularly. When court resumed, their attorney stood with a sudden, performative sigh. "My clients would like to present an alternate account of the events in question," he said. "Mr. Elliott contends that the financial activity in question was not orchestrated solely by him." I didn't flinch. Linda simply leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, waiting. Then the story came. According to my father's new version of events, he had no idea the account had been closed. He said he trusted Diana to handle the bills. He claimed the truck loan was something she handled with the bank, and that he had merely signed what was put in front of him. In his words, he was shocked and devastated to find out what she'd done. Shocked, devastated, a victim just like me. My mother's eyes widened. For the first time all day, she turned fully to look at him, mouth parting, face flushing. She shook her head slightly. "No," she mouthed, but didn't speak out loud. "I was told everything was fine," he added. "I was under the impression it was all legal and agreed upon." It was almost impressive how cleanly he cut her loose, but it got better. Because moments after that performance, her attorney stood and requested to enter a new statement from her client. A 2-page typed letter my mother had apparently prepared just in case her husband threw her under the bus. Because she knew him, knew how quickly he turned when cornered. Her version, that I had given them permission to use the funds, that I'd talked a big game about boundaries, but in practice, always helped when they needed it. She wrote that I had a pattern of offering support, then turning vindictive when thanked insufficiently. She didn't even deny using the card, just reframed it as ongoing implied consent. And just like that, they turned on each other and then circled back to blame me. The judge looked exhausted already. Linda stood slowly. "Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to remind the court that we have documented evidence of Mr. Elliott signing loan paperwork in person, as well as multiple communications where neither party expressed confusion or sought clarification. Additionally, both defendants responded to the plaintiff's personal letter acknowledging fault, not confusion." The judge nodded. "Duly noted." That moment, the one where they both sold each other out and still tried to drag me down with them, was strangely clarifying. I'd always seen them as a unit. Chaotic, yes. Toxic, definitely, but unified. That illusion crumbled right there in front of me. They would rather destroy each other and smear me than take accountability, and that told the judge everything they needed to know. The court case was still underway when a letter arrived at my apartment, tucked inside a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in careful cursive I didn't recognize at first. "I thought you should know this was never what she wanted. Your grandmother left you something. They didn't tell you. I'm sorry. A friend." At first, I thought it was a prank or maybe an attempt to distract me from the case, but something about the handwriting, the way the Y in you curled, the loop of the G in grandmother, felt eerily familiar. My paternal grandmother Lorraine had passed away 3 years ago. Her death had come quietly, with no drama or drawn-out estate proceedings. My parents handled everything and told me there wasn't much left, just a modest life insurance payout and some keepsakes. I hadn't questioned them. I was too overwhelmed with work at the time to think beyond the brief funeral and the usual awkward condolences. But now, with this note in hand, something shifted. The silence around her passing no longer felt normal. It felt curated, controlled. I found the name of Lorraine's estate attorney buried in the funeral paperwork I'd filed away. I called her, fully expecting to be dismissed. Instead, after confirming my name, she let out a sigh. "I've been waiting for this call," she said. "That's when everything changed." Lorraine had left a will, one my parents never told me about. In it, she had created a trust fund for me, small but meaningful, $28,000. She had handwritten the stipulations herself, noting that the money was for life goals, business endeavors, or emergencies. It was set to become mine on my 30th birthday. The trustee on file, my parents. Temporary until I claimed it. I never claimed it because I never knew it existed. All correspondence about the trust had been sent to my parents' address. According to the estate attorney, they were legally required to notify me. Instead, they had drained the account within weeks of its maturation. They told me you weren't interested in managing it, she said. I had no reason to question it, especially since they were listed as interim trustees and no objection was filed. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening as the last remaining shred of faith I had in them crumbled. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't an accident. This was theft. Coordinated, intentional theft from a woman who had loved me and wanted to give me something meaningful. They had stolen that too, silently, without hesitation. I hung up and opened my laptop. I created a new folder labeled Stolen Inheritance and dragged in everything: screenshots of the trust, the attorney's email, and a copy of Lorraine's handwritten note. Then I messaged Linda. We need to amend the suit. There's more. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. They hadn't only stolen my present. They had reached into the past and taken what someone who truly loved me had left behind. And now, they were going to answer for all of it. I never expected the truth to come from Olivia. We hadn't spoken in over a year, maybe more, not because we were distant, but because she'd always been caught in the gravitational pull of my parents, orbiting just close enough to benefit, never quite close enough to burn. She was the kind of cousin who liked to stay neutral, too polite to confront the family dysfunction, too aware to pretend it wasn't there. So when she texted me out of the blue with, "Can we talk?" I know things. I almost didn't reply, but something about the phrasing struck a chord. I know things, not "I'm sorry," not "what's going on." She wasn't offering comfort, she was offering information. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town. I arrived early, unsure if I was walking into support or sabotage. Olivia showed up 15 minutes late, sunglasses still on, her expression tight and unreadable. She didn't waste time. "They told me not to tell you about the trust," she said, voice low, eyes flicking nervously around the cafe. "When Grandma died, I was there the day the lawyer called. I overheard the whole thing." I blinked, trying to keep my breathing steady. "You knew?" She nodded, guilt flashing across her face. "Not everything, just that there was money, that it was yours. Aunt Diana said you didn't need it, that you'd blow it on something flashy or throw it in savings like you always do. Uncle Frank just said, 'She's our kid, what's hers is ours.' That last part hit like a brick. What's hers is ours. The same sentiment that had justified every boundary violation in my life, every stolen dollar, every erased birthday, every quiet, suffocating form of control. I didn't know they took it," Olivia continued. "Not until later, when your mom bragged about finally being able to handle the mortgage without Mac's help. I didn't ask questions. I'm sorry, I should have told you." I stared at her, torn between gratitude and fury. She had known, maybe not all of it, but enough. And she had said nothing while I struggled to keep my head above water, while I paid off my business loan with pennies scraped together from weekend gigs, while I rationed groceries, skipping dinners out so I wouldn't dip into savings. "You know they're going to face charges," I said, voice quiet but firm. She nodded. "I figured. That's why I'm here." Olivia reached into her purse and slid a thumb drive across the table. Screenshots, texts, voice memos. They've been sloppy, bragging mostly, and paranoid. Your dad said if you ever found out, they'd just guilt you into dropping it. "She's too soft," he said. I picked up the drive, the metal cool against my skin. Another puzzle piece. Another truth. "Why now?" I asked. She looked away. "Because I saw your mom at the salon last week, joking about how she might still be able to retire early if the court doesn't take too much. Like it was funny, like none of this mattered. And I realized, if she could laugh about stealing from her own daughter, what makes you think she wouldn't do it to the rest of us someday?" The truth settled between us like fog. Olivia wasn't just confessing. She was trying to stop her own slow slide into complicity, trying to salvage what was left of her conscience before it rotted like theirs. I nodded slowly. "Thank you. For this." She hesitated. "Are you going to send them to jail?" "If the court decides that's what they deserve," I said. "Then yes." Because this wasn't a grudge anymore, this was justice. And with Olivia's confession, I had everything I needed to make it happen. By the time the final hearing date was set, everything was in place. The evidence was airtight. The stolen inheritance, the fraudulent truck loan, the forged documents, the vacation photos, and now, Olivia's testimony and digital receipts. My case had grown from a personal grievance into a full-blown exposé of calculated generational exploitation. But I wasn't done yet. Revenge, for me, was never about screaming matches or dramatic courtroom takedowns. It was about clarity, about turning on the lights in a room they thought would always stay dark. They had gotten away with this sort of thing for years, using guilt, silence, and the illusion of authority to cover their tracks. It was time to pull that cover off for good. The court allowed one final opportunity for both parties to submit closing statements and additional supporting documentation. My parents, predictably clinging to their story that this was all a family misunderstanding, filed a letter begging for leniency. They framed their theft as misguided love, called the missing money temporary borrowing, and insisted that pressing charges would only tear the family apart further. That same week, I submitted my final piece of evidence, an audio recording captured quietly by Olivia at a casual dinner a few months prior. In it, you could hear my father laughing in the background, his voice unmistakable. "If Mac finds out," he said, "she'll cry about betrayal, post some emotional garbage online, and then move on. She always does." It was short, poorly recorded, but it didn't need to be high quality to be powerful. It was motive, and more than that, it was contempt. Linda reviewed it with me before submitting it. "This isn't just evidence," she said. "This is character, and judges care about that." But the real revenge didn't come in court. It came from something they never saw coming. While they were busy crafting apologies and excuses for the judge, I filed a separate report with the state licensing board. My father's side business, as a financial consultant no less, required an active certification, and part of that licensure agreement included a clause about disclosure. Any pending investigations or legal issues involving financial misconduct had to be reported. He hadn't reported it, so I did. 1 week before the final hearing, he received the letter. His credentials were officially suspended pending investigation. At 7:43 a.m., he called me from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was low and tight with fury. "You think this is over? You think ruining my career fixes anything? Who do you think you are?" I didn't answer. I simply saved the voicemail, and then, from a one-use number, I sent him a single text. "I don't know this number, but I do know this. You should have thought twice before turning your daughter into a casualty of your ego. Enjoy early retirement." I never heard back, but I didn't need to. At the final court appearance, my parents arrived subdued. No performative theatrics this time. No crocodile tears. Just two people who'd finally been cornered by the truth they couldn't twist. The judge's voice was calm as she read the ruling: full restitution, mandatory financial counseling, and referral to the district attorney for possible charges related to identity theft and wire fraud. My mother's face crumpled at the verdict. My father never looked at me, not once. Outside the courthouse, I watched them retreat toward the parking lot, their steps slow, defeated. They had taken so much from me, my peace, my trust, my sense of safety, but they had also given me something I didn't realize I needed: proof. Proof that I was never the fragile one in the story, just the one who finally said, enough. And this time, they were the ones left to live with the consequences. It didn't happen all at once. Power didn't return to me in a single court ruling or one cathartic conversation. It came in pieces, small, steady victories that slowly rewired how I saw myself. It came the day I woke up without checking my phone for another manipulative message. The day I walked into my bank and removed every last shared account, every automatic transfer, every link that tied me to people who only ever saw me as a resource. It came when I updated my credit report with a personal statement about the fraud and saw the words "fraudulent activity verified by police report" etched permanently into the account notes. Not a stain, proof, a record of what happened and who caused it. One afternoon, about a month after the final hearing, I walked into the office of a financial advisor, this time one of my own choosing. Her name was Renee, and she had no connection to my family, no preconceived notions, just a calm presence and a sharp mind. She helped me rebuild my finances from the ground up, We created a new savings strategy, opened a new investment account, and started the process of credit recovery. There were penalties and scars, yes, but we both knew this wasn't permanent damage. It was repairable. You have a survivor's instinct, Renee said during our second meeting. Most people never get this far. Most just keep bleeding quietly. I nodded. I knew what she meant. I had bled quietly for years. What surprised me most wasn't how quickly things improved. It was how natural it began to feel to protect myself, to say no, to close doors, to recognize emotional manipulation in its first, slithering form and shut it down before it could wrap itself around me again. Friends reached out after seeing public court records, some shocked, others not surprised at all. I always wondered how your parents afforded so much, one friend confessed. Now it makes sense. My extended family stayed mostly silent. Some sent awkward messages. A few reached out with empty advice. But they're still your parents. I ignored them all. That part of the story was over. The irony was not lost on me that the girl who once begged for scraps of love and approval from her parents had become the woman being quoted in business articles about financial boundaries. A local magazine featured a short profile on me titled, "When the Ones Who Raised You Rob You, How One Woman Took Her Power Back." I didn't ask for publicity. I didn't need it, but I didn't hide from it either. That 5-word text, "account closed, you don't have money anymore," was supposed to break me. Instead, it made me. Because here's what he didn't understand. When you cut someone off who's capable of standing on their own, you don't teach them a lesson. You teach them they never needed you in the first place. This story may have ended, but the message lingers. For more raw and real moments like this, click on the left and subscribe to walk alongside more women finding their strength. Healing takes time, but it's possible.